Now, back again to the land of the living. So you got through last week anyway, with all that material. It was a bit lengthy, but nevertheless, it covered all that I needed to cover for you. And what else was there? Do I have to say on that? Okay, this is our second last week together. You'll be delighted to know. And we the next Thursday night, not a lecture, just assignment, Q&A. You do the queuing, and I'll do the answering. And yeah, I'll give you some pointers on the assignment in particular. Yeah, some of the models. Plus, there'll be a couple of bits and pieces from tonight's lecture that you can also use as well. So hopefully tonight, anyway, we'll start pulling it together in terms of the practice of strategy and how it all fits together, blah, 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 and with some of the examples. Okay, folks, I'll get straight down to them. So, not true. So we're looking at modern strategic management, some of the approaches, frameworks, and effective execution. So the key methods and practices for organizational success. Name of the game, organizational success. And just a brief overview of the roadmap of what we're going to cover tonight. We'll have a quick look at strategic management versus planning. And the now the second one here, the strategic management steps. I'm not going to do that in detail. Actually, I think I deleted the slide from that because we've done this several times already, and you would have covered it in the strategic management concepts. Then have a brief look at these other tools again with some examples: SWOT, Fortress 5 Forces, and VRIO model, which I did mention to you that we would have a look at towards the end of the module. And lastly, then we look at the VRIO again and applying these frameworks, plus balanced scorecard. And then lastly, some of the trends and most importantly, continuous improvement. Because essentially everything is an iterative loop, cyclical process. Develop strategies, put our plans in place, we measure them, come out the far end, we change them as we go along, come out the far end, and we do the whole thing all over again. But we learn from what we did in the previous iteration of our strategy. Well, we hope we learn. So tonight, management versus planning. And then we'll have an introduction or a talk on the agile side of things. And really, that's just another name for having your wits about you, quickly responding to the changes. We talked about this when we looked at emergent strategy and Mintzberg's approach to emergent strategy. Things change, the goalposts change from month to month, quarter to quarter. We don't know what's happening. And never a night goes by that I don't get to mention. But again, you have all this frolicking around with Trump and tariffs and so on. And there's Trump people all over the place. Now he's talking about pharmaceuticals. So you can imagine the Irish companies or government in particular would be a little bit nervous about this and so on. And one interesting way of tracking the first 6 months of this year is looking at the stock market and the S&P and particularly the index, and you can see it going up and down in response to these crazy decisions. But as a company, it's pretty unnerving times to be operating in. So most companies will be looking at for more stability, and that's all they want, to be able to plan and stick to plans. And when you have this erratic behavior, it makes life extremely difficult. So the logical way to go is easier said than done. We'll be looking for new markets, exploit new markets, so something where there would be a level of stability. So again, the nature of strategic management, continuous process that focuses on executing and adapting strategies over time. That's the nature of strategic management. adapt and modify. And the purpose of planning involves setting long-term goals and defining the actions needed to achieve them. Now, again, the actions could be changes in processes, organizational restructures, evaluating your competencies, and building and or as they say, exploiting those competencies to uh, get an advantage over your competitors. And then, of course, as I said, the organizational alignment, which I just mentioned, organizational efforts, and to improve effectiveness. So again, hiring the right people, right processes in place, reorganization, all of these elements that need to be mixed and matched. So if you take, for example, you take a simple recipe, you probably change it each time you do it. You might modify it, stick strictly to the original menu if it were a recipe, but we tend to want to experiment a little bit, and that's essentially what we're doing, changing ingredients of the recipe such that we have a more favorable output. And when we look at balancing planning and management strategy, so on the left here you can see strategic planning. So we have some kind of future focus. We have to have our roadmaps, our ways of getting to the end goal. And there's something keeps popping up on my YouTube channel, these ads as such. And this guy, he's talking about consultants, and he talks about, consultants come in and they give you um, a menu of what to do, but he's the way they do it, that it's like and he uses the London Underground map. That how would you know how you're getting from one station to the next unless you had a map there? And that's important, a roadmap or some kind of high level plan, so to speak. And then, of course, we have on the management side of it, where we are today, our strategic vision would be where we'd like to be, hence the bridge future of the organization. What could it look like, and how we communicate all of this to our organizational people. And then, of course, dynamic implementation. That's the changing strategy, the agility in organizations. Dynamic implementation can also imply that you're doing things differently, open to learning, trying things out. And as I said, traditional versus agile strategic planning methods. Well, fundamentally, most organizations have morphed or evolved into the agile planning style simply because of the types of tools we're using, the likes of balanced scorecard and so on. These underpin that kind of agility, looking at the different components and how they're impacting us, and then involving people. The more people you have involved, the better mix of options, opinions, ideas that can be tested out that support the strategy, different perspectives. Agile planning advantages. It's iterative, flexible, enabling rapid response to changes and increased adaptability. That's core. That's what we've said from virtually day one. Companies do need to be extremely flexible. As I described it, we operate in what's referred to as a complex, dynamic environment. And you might have simple environments, very few and far between. But we're in the diagonal opposite of simple. We're in chaos, complex, dynamic environments. And in those environments, we have to be, as I said, have our wits about us. So we need to have the tools to help us. And stakeholder involvement inside and using agile approach. Anyone that's impacted, not just within the four walls of the organization, but the local community, local government, national governments, anyone, investors, institutional investors, whomever has any impact, and indeed customers, suppliers, and so on. These would be considered to be the wider stakeholders that are interested or have an interest in you doing well as an organization. Because you're a supplier, if your suppliers have a vested interest, they want you to succeed. Keep buying from them, obviously. So the benefits of adapting the agile strategic planning approach, again, addresses human capital limitations. It also evaluates options against objectives, uses results amid change or changes, partners build consistent responsibility, and regularly review and adjusts the strategy. So you're getting this whole dynamics coming in, getting feedback, constant evaluation through this agile planning, and in small incremental steps. That way we can make changes. If it doesn't work, we can revert back and try something new more quickly. And we might do this on a quarterly basis, and keeping the bigger picture in mind, is where we'd like to be, but we're having to make these changes. If you were to drive a road for the first time, you'd be a bit more careful. And the next time around there, you'd say, "Oh, I remember that bend, and I remember this crossroads," and so on. So you adjust your driving style to the second time round. But we will be cautious. But nevertheless, you might take some chances the first time and say, "Oh, this looks clear," or maybe I'll drive it early in the morning when there's no traffic on it, or late at night, whatever the case may be. But in any case, you'll try and get to the destination safely. And then at last, reacts to change with metrics. And that's important. You're using data. So again, very simply, the strategic management process, as we've covered a number of times anyway. So we look at the evaluation, assess and modify the strategy, execution, allocation of resources, the blueprint or the plan itself, strategic plan, and then finally, dynamic process of implementing and modifying the plans. That's the basic setup or the roadmap for a strategic management. And if you want to achieve these goals, quite simply, setting the goals, situational analysis, internal, external, all the tools you have for that, SWOT, Porter's 5 Forces, McKinsey's 7 S's, ANZUP matrix, BCG matrix, balanced scorecard. What else can we use? I said ANZUP. There are a couple more of them, but generally speaking, they're the generic tools that you can use to get your current situation. Then we formulate, we execute, and then we evaluate. You could cut that down to 4. Plan, do, check, act. And that simple model is extremely powerful, and that's why I actually like it. And people say, "Well, oh no, this isn't of graduate level or master's level." Of course it is. It's because it's simple. It doesn't have to be complex. It takes small chunks, plan it, do it, act on it, and then check our results. And again, just morphing across then challenges and solutions. So the usual challenges that you'll have inside, resistance to change, inadequate resources, ineffective leadership, lack of clear vision, poor communication, and failure to adapt. So these are all the challenges. Now, interesting one down here, this ineffective leadership. This is becoming even more challenging in the current environment. And I'm seeing a proliferation of commentary on leadership and AI, and entrusting staff to use AI, leaders themselves using AI, what they think is appropriate or permissible or effective. And if you even only take today's news front page or one of the pages on the Independent and on the 6-1 News, accounting jobs, the recruitment level has dropped off because of AI. Oh, I'm surprised it's taken so long. And I've been mouthing off about this 2.5 years ago to my accounting colleagues, and so I said, "I don't know why you're doing this stuff." I said, "You have applications already that are quite simply able to do that work. And I said, when this AI takes off, it's going to do an awful lot more marketing, HR, finance, just to name the obvious three that are going to have the biggest impact. And you will see as time moves on over the next 6 months, fewer and fewer people, or there will be that guy from Spotify, his policy or approach will start to take root across most organizations. Can the work be done by AI? If yes, then we're not hiring people. That's the first question. If it can't be done by AI, can you hire somebody who has the AI skill, come in and raise us to the next level? And a number of companies have even identified that graduates coming in with AI are extremely valuable. Beating that drum for a long time now. So strategic analysis tools, briefly looking at these, you know all about your SWOT, just another representation of it. Bias and subjectivity. So again, watch that. These are some of the challenges that you might, to say, the common mistakes that you could make in your assessments. And it can be difficult, particularly when you're internally in the organization. There can be a level of pride that you don't want to be self-critical, and bias can kick in. So how can you remain objective or positive in that respect, even though there are negatives that need to be addressed? Don't mention the war kind of thing, but sometimes you have to. That's why there are certain types of individuals in organizations that are worth their weight in gold, those that are constantly the sometimes we refer to them as the moaners or the begrudgers, because they're always giving out and moaning about this, that, and the other, but they're seeing things from a different perspective, and that's valuable. It's, as a leader, it's really worth listening to. Why do they feel that way? Why? What are they seeing that I'm not seeing? I'm seeing everything is going tremendously well, but they find issues, and sometimes they can be 50-50. Their behavior can be legitimate, and you're not just seeing it as a leader or as another team member. Analysis by paralysis. Again, overthinking leads to inaction. It's an interesting concept insofar as that there are times you're going to have to make decisions where you don't have all the data and you can't wait for all the data. So oftentimes you have to go with your gut feeling. Now, again, you can be quite quick in making decisions based on some data and a good intuition. And there's nothing wrong with that. And as long as you stand back and you understand how and why you made that decision, reflective practice as a leader in an organization. So you can actually say, well, that worked for me. And this is why, even though I didn't have all the data, not only partial reports, but I was able to maneuver or make a decision that paid off. It's important that you stand back and say, well, why? What was it about my intuition that worked in this instance? So overthinking. And the downside of it, if you try to wait for all of the data or all of the reports to come in, you will have missed opportunities. Your competitors could actually be out there ahead of you. Lack of diverse perspectives. Again, interesting concept. That's why I say cross-functional teams are extremely powerful in any organization, because you get different perspectives, whether it is a HR perspective, marketing, operations, legal, finance, IT, all these, they know their areas and they see things somewhat differently to you or very similar to you. In any case, it strengthens and feeds into your decision-making process. And particularly when you have cross-functional agreement and everyone has a clear understanding of what the problem and the solution is. Infrequent reviews, stale data leads to outdated strategies. Yeah. Again, if you're having monthly or quarterly reports, again, data is important. How much of it do you need? How often should you be running reports? You don't want to be doing it just because it's due on a particular month. For example, you do monthly accounts and or monthly management accounts. You're coming up to the month of December. 2 weeks into December, orders close off. Is it important that you have to have the monthly reports produced on the third day in January, for example? Probably not. You could wait an extra week or two because of the holiday period and so on. So, common sense approach in terms of reporting. Just because it's written that we have to have monthly reports doesn't necessarily mean that you actually have to have them, because there might be slack periods where it's there's nothing to report. Summertime. Internal and external imbalance, again, neglecting either internal or external factors in the SWOT. So the opportunities and threats, gorging on information, external information, really important. I'm sitting down, I might be watching some, I'll say, app on TV, because half time I've only one eye on the TV, the other eye is on my mobile phone, and I'm reading something about lately programming or AI and assessment or AI and new tricks and all this sort of stuff. Next month it could be something totally different. So being a sponge, and you need to be on a professional level. What was the latest one I was looking at today? The impact on AI in higher education and the use of it in assessments, and how the whole sector has changed its attitude. I've just been sitting back and waiting for this change because I could see it coming since I started getting comfortable with this stuff. It was only a matter of time. So that whole horizon is changing. So taking advantage of, and now you can overwhelm yourself with information and go down rabbit holes. You need to use your time wisely. Similarly when you're dealing externally. So Porter's five forces, and using this applied to Walmart, for example. So you have Walmart there in the middle. Who's the rivalry within their industry? Costco, Target, Amazon, and Kroger. Who are the new entrants? High capital requirements, economies of scale. So could you imagine now trying to set up a competitive company to Amazon, for example? Just look at the facilities, hence high capital requirements and so on. So you won't have too many people entering at that level overnight. It can take years, but you'd want to be watching, aspiring companies. That's Spanish. Carrefour, for example, could be another challenger coming in there, and so on. Wouldn't be overly worried about the likes of M&S and so on. They're fairly localized. And then you have the Far Eastern companies, the Temus, the Wishes, and Shine, and all these places that are coming online or have been online as such. They're serious threats to the likes of Walmart, particularly of IT and online accessibility. Power of suppliers, so massive purchasing power. So it's and that's the point with Walmart. They actually got into a spot of bother. Two reasons: almost putting companies out of business by forcing down the purchasing prices of their products, and also in relation to HR, there were some issues, discrimination against black females, I think it was, and that's maybe 10, 15 years ago. In any case, they would have been in hot water, again, forcing companies to sell below cost even. Buyers, low prices and convenience, and that's the space they Walmart operate in. However, one of their brilliant marketing strategies, as I mentioned before, you're looking for a toaster. You might see one advertised for $9.99. You probably think, geez, it probably burned the toast, whatever. But then the next one is $11.99, then $15 or $16.99, then going up to 25, 30, 60, 70, 190 on the far end of the aisle. Now I don't know what €190 poster will be doing for you. Probably 8 slices, feed a small army, and all that sort of stuff. In any case, they know that there's not going to be too many people, but it's there, and they know the bell curve. Most people they won't buy the cheap one. They will come in, they'll look at the next price and move along and fall somewhere in the upwards part of the bell curve. Say the medium price is around 45 euros for a toaster. So anywhere between, we'd say, 30 and 60, that space, that's where they'd store most of their stock to have it available. So they have that. Again, how do they know this? Analysis and psychology, consumer behavior. And even if they carry a minimal stock of a 9.99 poster, that's all it'll be. An absolute, a couple of them in the far corner of the stores. That's about it, because they know they're not going to be bought. Oh God, sorry. Did I miss anything? Oh, substitutes. Vast product variety. Again, they also have, as in the case I just gave so many different variations of products. Having quick substitutes, not a major problem for them by any stretch, because they might have some of the branded items on their shelves, whereas Costco might have different branded items on their shelves. That's about as much differentiation you might see between them, but very rare see that kind of. Usually they'll cater for all brand names and so on. So getting substitutes in there wouldn't be. It'd be way down there on their worry list. So that's essentially a brief look at how Walmart know where. So they'd be targeting or watching their rivals very, very carefully, looking at what they're doing in terms of how they can actually outmaneuver them, both through marketing and on price, and get a larger share of the market. So again, the VRIO: valuable, rare, inimitable, and organized. This is the value, as we call it, the evaluation pyramid. So we're looking for, what's valuable, exploits opportunities, or neutralizes threats. Anything that can, or core competencies, what's important to us, processes, people, assets, specific equipment or technology, for example, that would be valuable to our company. Then rare, again, few competitors possess this resource. Where you're seeing this, for example, at the moment, there is a recruitment battle going on between Meta and OpenAI. What's his name? Altman's company and Zuckerberg's companies. Meta are coaching and recruiting OpenAI engineers and paying big bucks to get them in there, because they have a rare skill. They're senior engineers in AI technology. That's why Meta want them to increase their market share, roll out their models, and so on and so on. And so again, if you have rare resources, few competitors possess this resource, then you're going to have to defend those resources. If they're your employees, you're going to have to look after them. And then inimitable, difficult or costly for others to copy. You can do that through patenting, copywriting, and so on, intellectual property, but only so far, because someone will come out with an alternative, different solution. That's why having your roadmap of your product or service that enables you to keep rolling out your next generations. And if you take, again, we'll just stick with the AIs. Look at the Chat GPTs, how many variations you have that, and the numbering is even difficult to follow. We're on 4.5 now, and then they're talking about 5. They've already, on their maps, probably have 5.5, 6, 6.5, and 7. They're probably 3 years down the road with their technology, all the time knowing that this is going to change dramatically by the time they actually get to release those versions of the platforms. So they're already talking about super intelligence. So the AI is talking to one another and developing a super intelligence. And finally, firms can exploit resources effectively. So when you have these lower parts of those building blocks, and if you can direct them and steer them in the right direction, then you have the recipe just right. Then you can take on any competitors and you're going to increase your market share. But it's a very fine balancing act to get to that level. You have to be so protective. So using this tool for this company called Alpha Fitness and clothing, could be Callus Clothing, they're a Polish company, I think. So the brand, it's unique and difficult to imitate, ensuring sustainability. So is Nike, so is Under Armour, all of these things. Technologies, production processes, how do they produce the products, how quickly they can change, the types of raw materials they're using, quality, key differentiator, providing sustainable edge. You take, for example, Privet from Lidl. You know the way we joke about the Lidl Aldi snow gear and so on and so forth, manufactured by a company called Privet. Any of your other sportswear and so on and so forth, Privet. Here's the kicker in it: top-notch stuff. That's nothing. The stuff that they produce is not to be sneezed at, I can tell you. It was one of the World Tour groups, only Quick Step, and Lidl Trek, and who else? Bora Hansgrohe, I think it was. They actually used Privet, which was a German company. They used their gear, and it was, if you were to spend 120, 160 euros on a cycling top, a branded one, Privet were doing the same for maybe half the price, and it was equally as good. If it was good enough for two riders, it was good enough for the likes of me and the rest to wear. And then employee benefits for this company, Alpha. Employee benefits are valuable but easily imitable, hence temporary. Always is the case. Remember, as I said, when you're dealing with people, no matter what it is, it's always a question of what's in it for me. What do I get out of this? Pay increase, promotion, alternative career, so on, so on. There's always what's in it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's human nature. And as long as you're aware of it, and again, pay increases, bonuses are only temporary. The satisfaction, you might remember this back to your very early days of economics, particularly when you're buying goods of ostentation, luxury goods. You'll go out and you'll spend a small fortune on a dress, suit, pair of shoes, handbag, whatever, and you feel good. Part of maybe on the way home or a week later, Jesus, should have spent that money on it. You'll have a little bit of a guilt feeling. Then you'll start to rationalize why, yes, I do feel good. And generally speaking, you fall into the camp of, yes, it makes me feel good. But that's the whole point. That's why we buy luxury items from time to time. It's about you, making you feel good. The hell with everyone else. Okay, they might admire what you're wearing or so on and so forth, but as long as it makes you feel good, that's what's important. And here, same with this, it's a temporary. Next season or next year, there's something new comes out. So the luxury item bought last year comes relegated. Same thing happens in companies. These HR things are one of the better techniques would be share options, and that giving part ownership. That tends to it's a very effective retention mechanism. So the balanced scorecard. How are we doing time-wise? Doing pretty okay. So you have these four key areas: finance, customer, internal processes, and learning and growth. And underneath these, you can see the metrics that you use: profitability under finance, the growth, financial, and return on investment. Pretty straightforward. That's only the and return on earnings per share. That's probably the most important metric for evaluating a company's performance, because that tells you how effectively your share investment is working for the company. So if the earnings per share ratio is increasing, that means they're putting your money to good effect as a shareholder. And then the purpose links current actions and provides comprehensive view. The numbers basically gives you, but it's only part of the picture. So if you look from the balanced scorecard, what we're trying to do here: improve our satisfaction scores with customers, increase our market share, retention rates, holding on to existing customers, avoiding churn. So it links to current action again and provides comprehensive view, the purpose of all these. So you can see the purpose from above, two key purposes of these metrics supporting the overall pillars, customers, and so on. And go down to the last one: learning and growth, employee training hours. How much are you investing on your employees? And you can actually go back over then from employee training hours, for example, and you can have another metric down here on return on investment in employees. So how much more efficient or productive our employees based before and after particular training has taken place, and you can measure that. Now, it's not necessarily a financial measurement. I mean, quality or quantity of output, but nevertheless, you can measure it as a return on investment in employees, and that's the last, I would say, 20 years anyway. Has been growing in effectiveness and popularity of use. Are we getting the best out of our people? Innovation rates, systems capabilities. So all of this is all organizational based and hugely important, because the more currently trained employees you have, the more effective they can be at innovation and ultimately improving your systems capabilities, better processes, procedures, and so on. Again, links current actions where we are now. So you'll have a roadmap. So similarly, as you would have your roadmap for your products and services, to get there, you're going to have to invest and develop people capabilities. So similarly, they would have roadmaps. So I would have your professional development plan. So what training are you going to take on? And companies invest in people to take on this training with a view to using the output, in other words, the trained version of you, in some new context or in another part of the organization. So it's a mutual beneficial agreement, not the psychological agreement, beneficial agreement. So the balanced scorecard again: feedback and learning, so testing and refining strategies through data analysis, business planning, setting long-term targets for growth and success, translating vision, clarifying strategic goals into measurable metrics, and then communicating and linking, aligning incentives with strategic outcomes. And the key point of that process or model, Kaplan and Norton are the two guys that developed this, are metrics. Everything is measured, and then they're able to cross-reference the different metrics, give them more and more information, enabling better decision. So which strategic framework should be used for planning? You have a whole choice of them here. McKinsey's OKRs, PEST, BCG, Hands Off, Blue Ocean. If you take best for creating new market spaces through innovation, Blue Ocean. OKRs is the effective for setting and tracing objectives and key results. It's OKR. So again, set that, and now we'll measure where we're heading, and so on. the rest of those. Is there anyone else I would include inside there? Oh yeah, the previous ones, VRIO and Balanced Scorecard. So implementation trends and continuous improvement. Quite simply, clear roles, progress monitoring, resource allocation, communication, leadership development, and continuous learning. They're all the key ingredients for strategic success. As I say, the foundations for strategic success. I don't know if we take, for example, leadership development, investing in leadership capabilities and setting clear expectations. That's it. That's become quite difficult since COVID, particularly enabling leadership, through remote working and so on. And now, as I say, bring on the added dimension of AI and how you can use it and use it to support you as a manager and take some of the mundane tasks out of your routines and give you more space for interperson action. And that's what will underpin the skills of leadership. I don't know if you've had a chance or if it worked for you. I uploaded a psychometric test. Did you have a look at that, anyone? Yeah. After a lot of research, there were the 8 core skills of leadership that I've identified, and I'm reasonably happy with the consensus. As I said, I don't need the results. That was for yourselves. If you got it working, at least if you got the outputs for each of the 8 tests, you'll see that you're going up in the right direction. You can put your own professional plans in place to achieve those. Would I follow that? Absolutely. There are certain skills identified inside there that are absolutely critical for future leadership development or growth in organizations, particularly the way technology is going to push you in those directions. So and that was, I did that using AI, my own research and so on. And since then, I'm about 2/3 of rewriting it using Python code. Why? Because I don't know Python and I wanted to achieve something. So, and oh yeah, since I last met you, I became a pensioner. Hey. Jesus.
Happy belated birthday.
Congratulations.
and I feel it. Yeah. Jesus. So where was that? Yes, leadership development critical in all organizations, and the rest are communication. That's implicit in good leadership and continuous learning. Exactly what you're doing yourselves. I'll be seeing you all back on the master's program, next year, or definitely September, 12 months, once you've gotten over this part of it. I'm quite sure. Continuous development. But same for organizations. Organizations have to learn, and it's how quickly and the metrics you can identify to show that the organization is performing and learning and growing as an and there are even tools for that, maturity tools that you can evaluate performances on. So navigating the strategic planning trends. What can I say? AI incorporating for customer service and automation? Not only, also your internal stuff and what tasks can be done by some version or part of AI. It's inevitable. So once you know about it and you can use it, then you're in safe territory. You will become more valuable to your organization. Data analytics, again, most of that will be handled by the AI systems, but you have to have that gut feeling. You have to understand. So I had a group of colleagues I was giving a talk to on Tuesday down in Athlone, and the key point I was making was that one of the points was that you need to own the outcome of it. In other words, you need to understand what the AI is doing. You don't know. You don't need to know how the thing is programmed and so on. You couldn't, but you need to have a feel for what you're asking and what you're expecting out of it, and corroborate it. Check the output. Run it through 2 or 3 times to make sure you have a consensus. In other words, that you remove as much of the intuition as possible, that you're happy to go with what you have as outcome. Remote working, resilience planning, interestingly, preparing for cybersecurity threats and economic uncertainties. Well, that's the IT department's nightmare right now, but also our own responsibilities. I'm quite sure you've had training on, what you should and shouldn't do with emails and what to open and what not, particularly if you're on company networks and so on. We even have it, and if we open certain emails, our IT manager has a habit of putting stuff out there, phishing emails, every so often. And if you breach one of those emails and you open the attachment or open the email because you weren't paying attention to the title or who it was from, then you have to go back and it'll send you off, retake this training course, for could be an hour long or whatever. And personalization, this is where things are really fascinating. Tailoring experiences through customer segmentation and engagement. That's all very fine. We're getting more and more data about our customers, and we can almost customize to an individual level. Some people will say, but we don't want that. But if that's what the customer wants, that's what you give them. But also, part of the talk on Tuesday was personalized learning. Why would you all have to learn strategic management? Some are more advanced than others on this subject matter. Therefore, how can we personalize it to meet precise needs of each learner in an organization? I tried it in 2013 with a small group of entrepreneurs, and it worked very, very well. There was no formality about what we're doing. We didn't have lectures. We had workshops, and some people were very attuned to finance and marketing, whereas others weren't. So they didn't have their time wasted going through marketing lectures or going through HR and finance lectures when they were they had it from their undergraduate days. So we used their time differently in areas that they were interested in learning, such as operations, for example, or in IT support for their ventures and so on. So they found those things to be the big challenge. So we concentrated on those areas for them. And what I did, here's the secret behind that. What I did was I sat down with there were 8 entrepreneurs, and we asked them, what are you comfortable and what are the areas you want to learn more about? And they honestly answered back and came out. So I applied a 360 performance appraisal approach. That was the trick in it. So with each individual, I sat down and said, right, on a score of, from 1 to 10, what's important to you? Oh, I haven't got a clue of operations and IT. Okay, they'll carry the most weighting. I'm really comfortable with finance and I'm really comfortable with marketing. Okay, they'll carry a low weighting. So when they were doing their assessments, I used that metric to evaluate their overall results. So we customized pretty much each entrepreneur's development. But it was a proof of concept. When I suggested introducing it into third level, that didn't go down too well because it would have meant too much work. But then when you're talking about, having 50, 60 or 100 students, it becomes overwhelming. But now, not that I'm anywhere of the same category, what's his name? Steven Spielberg, when he was, George Lucas, and he was developing Star Wars, and the guy that developed the Matrix and Star Trek movies, they had to wait until the technology was some way usable that they could modify it and create those special effects. Same for Lord of the Rings. The very first version of black and white was an unmitigated nightmare. But when technology picked up, they were able to create the experience and so on. So we're getting there now. In a heartbeat, we could do this now using AI technology, create personalized learning. System, as it stands, isn't flexible enough to adapt. So I could be retired before we see any of these great innovations implemented. I know I want to stick around for a few more years. We were the goal, for heaven's sake. I miss these Thursday nights. So strategic planning and statistics impacts, again, faster growth, companies with written business plans or business cases, strategic belief in change. So you can see these percentages more, mapped out to the key elements. If you look down here, profitability increase from enhanced execution. That's where to see the how well you do things, how well, going back to that the balancing act of the VRIO methodology. You identify your core competencies, you exploit those core competencies, you protect them, and you end up with a recipe or a team that's extremely effective, highly responsive, and that will increase profitability, potentially. And then employee confidence and leadership, as you can see, 22%. So employees' confidence in leaders' clear direction. So again, having some clarity, cross-functional teams, effective decision-making, good metrics, enabling improved decision-making, team approach, team vision, team decision-making. That'll bump that up from 22% to higher. And the most important thing then is continuous improvement cycle. If you start here, learn from experience, move down into incorporate feedback, evolve strategies, agile responses, and then review the whole lot again and start the cycle again. And that's the where was I coming on with that? Something else in my mind. Not the Plan, Do, Check, Act. It's gone from my mind. Yeah, it's essentially the Plan, Do, Check, Act model over and over, iterating and first time. But important, learning from, the business model canvas. That's another variation of this. You go out to try something, talk to the customers, they'll give you feedback, then you iterate, you go to the next level, or you reverse a step, move forward. And that's why, in other words, if you have evolved a mindset to get away from these long-term actions as such, they're nice to have, they're your strategic objectives and goals, but how effectively you do things in between, the number of iterations you learn from, and the important thing is that you learn from these each time you do something and you become more effective. It's like your learning curve. The more you do something, the better you become at it. And then you have your conclusion, agile approaches, robust frameworks, which I have a list of them there tonight. And if you add to that question mark list the other two from previous, VRIO and balanced scorecard. And then effective implementation, executing strategy efficiently ensures sustainable growth and competitive advantage in dynamic markets or in complex dynamic environments, organizations. There you are for tonight. That's you now at the end of this semester. Okay. Oh, look at that. Sweet. 5 minutes to spare. Well, 2 minutes late I started and 3 minutes left. It took me nearly 12 weeks to get it right.
You got there though. That's the main thing.
Indeed. I need to take on board my I need to take on board my own diagrams, learning from experience. I'll get it right yet. So folks, that's enough of the theory and all that goes with it. And the deep dive on this one was actually quite interesting and lengthy. There was, I think, 34 minutes of podcast on this one, which was interesting because I tried something different to generate that podcast, and and that overview document is a little bit more comprehensive, not as same structure and number of pages, but a little bit broader than the straightforward PowerPoint slides itself. So I went through a number of iterations to fine tune it. At one point, I was up at 90 slides. Imagine if I sat down here with you good selves, 90 slides on a hot night like this. No. So got the key points down, refinement, so on. Any questions, comments, insults, jokes even? So,
Do you know, Mark,
yeah.
do we have access to the materials after we finish the course in July? Do we still have access to Moodle for a while to kind of check things or download things or listen to things we didn't get a chance to?
That's a good question,
finish?
Maeve. I'm not sure. I'd say you would be safe. When are you graduating? October, is it?
Yeah, October.
I'd say you could be safe up till then. But I'll actually I'll try and find out between now and next week if I can. What's the once your student number is still active, and it'll certainly be still active, going through to graduation, because they'll be contacting you and making all sorts of arrangements and hiring your gear and all that. So that might,
Okay.
well, at least the all of the videos will certainly be available, but the hardcore material in Moodle, at least up to graduation, and maybe for a short while afterwards.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Not at all. Anyone else? Any questions or comments? Or I will let you go, folks, and we will reconvene next Thursday night for the Q&A session on the assignment. So have your questions prepared, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them. Well, to be able to answer them on Thursday night, so such that you can wrap up this assignment with as little anxiety as possible. Alrighty, folks. And don't forget, AI is your friend. I'm saying it because...
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Radio, folks. I'll see you next week.
Mark.
God bless. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.